Okay, so yesterday we had our survey, and it's brutal. All these areas marked in red have wet core. And interesting enough, we're okay close to the keel, but as we get 7-8 inches out away from it, and probably 24 to 36 inches away, it's wet. There's a bunch. Suspect the water inlet is a candidate for source of water over here. We have the exhaust problem that I think everyone knows is fairly common. This is the port side, very similar. It's a significant amount of area. Interestingly enough, the through holes were okay. But like I said, this is significant. This is going to be a project. So again, next to the keel, we're okay, but as we move up, you can see that behind the water tank. This is in front of the sink, certainly down below the sink, and then heading back towards under the engine. And again, back here in front of the chart table, and all across there, and then up forward there was one spot way up in the bow that was an issue. And one thing that we have been talking about is what the source of this water is, and those are bolts for the tow rail, and clearly they are contributors. Then all the dang screw holes holding that wood trim in wasn't a great idea. So she suggested a technique that I don't think I'm going to use. I think it's interesting, and that is to drill a pattern of holes, use a vacuum pump, and then basically apply a vacuum to the area, and by doing that you can essentially boil off the water out of that core. But I don't know, I just suspect that's really problematic and may not solve the problem. So it's going to be a bunch of work, more than I had in mind, but not impossible. And I think the question that I'm struggling with right now is whether or not to use balsa core again, or to use one of the core cell type or Divinycell products. And you know, if you're fixing this, it's kind of like you want to fix it so it doesn't ever happen again. And I think there's two parts to that solution. One is to eliminate all the goofy holes in the hull that are just inherently problematic in terms of allowing water and moisture into the matrix. And then even if it does get in there, if you use the foam core materials, you ought not have the saturation. And one of the things that's interesting is this is not delaminated. It's wet, but it's not delaminated. We drilled a couple sample holes to tap this with a hammer. It sounds actually pretty good, but when we do drill holes in it, we get some nice soggy balsa out of the core. So needs to be addressed, and we'll just sort our way through each and every bit of this. But I would be curious if anyone's had any experience with the pulling the vacuum routine and the results there, because that leaves all of the laminate matrix in place, and then once you have satisfactorily dried the section, then you can just seal your holes up. Like I said, I'm having a hard time with the success rate on that, and for the time spent, it's like, man, if you do it and you don't get the result you want, then could have been on the known solution sooner. So we did get the port lights completely out and cleaned up yesterday. We had a gorgeous day here. And I was tempted to put in the new port lights I just made, but then it occurred to me that since I'm planning on doing painting at some point in time, the better option would be to leave them out and then and not have to deal with taping them over and whatnot when I start doing painting. So anyway, like I said, if there's any good thing here, it's that we don't have problems along the center line. In the solid glass areas, we don't see any cracks or any significant problems. And weirdly enough, the only problem with the deck is with the hatch cover. Very likely the screws that cover it have allowed moisture into the overhead just in front of it, but that's of all the things that we got here, that's minor, so that'll be an easy fix. So the rudder was also completely saturated, as I had suspected it was. Could have been sources of the water, could have been any of these bolts, or even the tiller that it wasn't sealed at all. I mean, it's just a big void space in there, so if there was core in there, and there probably was, it just deteriorated. So some of the supplies showed up already. We got new bilge hoses over there. That's going to be a down the road project, because with all the cutting we got, no reason to be dealing with hoses in the way, so we'll leave them out for now. And got some work started on these hatches, but again, that's a down the road project until we get all this core issue sorted out. Okay, so here you can see the old plexiglass taped down to the new piece, and you can again see the oversized ends, and again the pattern following bit will size that to the exact same size as this existing port light. If there's any trick to this stuff, it's don't overdo the double-sided tape. It can be a real pain to get these parts separated if you overdo it. So here's a little better look at the pattern following bit, and it's just a simple matter of following along. The next thing you got is an identical part to your template, in which case, in this case, it's the old window or port light. Simple. Okay, the next step I'm taking is to put a round over on the edge. Here's, you can see this top piece is the old one, and there's a very slight round over on that, and I think that's got to be really helpful because the receiving side of the window has got a radius as well, and I think you get a lot better seal with some round over. You would not want to leave that edge square. So another pass around this thing, and this looks like, oh, maybe something a little bigger than a quarter. I don't think it's a half, but I'm not sure. I'll have to measure it.